The collapse begins. You've spent your life perfecting the act. You smile when expected. You speak when it's safe. You say you're fine when you're falling apart inside. You've learned how to be what others need. Nice, strong, reliable, easy to love. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking what you need. Because survival taught you something dangerous. That being loved means being likable. That safety comes from being acceptable. So you crafted the mask, not made of plastic, but of polite laughter, performative confidence, and emotional silence. And you wore it well, so well, in fact, that even you forgot it was a performance. But now the cracks are showing. You feel the weight of the persona. You feel how fake the smile has become. You feel like something real is trying to break through, and it's terrifying. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Letting go of the mask doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like death. Not death of the body, but of the story. The story you told the world to stay safe. The story you told yourself to feel worthy. And now, standing at the edge of it all, you're being asked the question, if the mask dies, what's left of me? This isn't your rise, it's your descent. And the only way out is through. The persona was born to protect you, but it's not who you are. Let's go back, before the job title, before the image, before the perfectly curated version of you that the world sees. Go back to the moment when you first realized that certain parts of you weren't welcome. Maybe it was the day you cried too loudly and were told to toughen up. Or when you expressed anger and were punished for it. Or when your sensitivity was mocked, your creativity dismissed, your truth ignored. And so, like all children do, you adapted. You trimmed the edges. You smiled when you didn't want to. You agreed when your soul screamed no. You became what was rewarded and buried what wasn't. That's how the persona was born. Carl Jung called it the mask we wear to meet the world. But make no mistake, you didn't wear it because you were fake. You wore it because it was safer than being real. Because in the environments we grow up in, homes, schools, churches, social systems, authenticity is not always safe. It's not always accepted. And so, your psyche did what it had to do. It split. One part of you became the acceptable self, polished, agreeable, functional. The other part, it went underground, into the shadow. But here's where it gets tragic and deeply human. The more praise you received for the mask, the more disconnected you became from the self behind it. Every you're so mature, every you're so easy to be around, every you're the strong one, all of it reinforced the belief that your real self, the messy, emotional, vulnerable one, was somehow unlovable, so you stayed in character, not because you're fake, but because you're loyal to survival. But eventually, that loyalty turns into imprisonment. The persona, which once protected you, now limits you. You find yourself stuck in a life that feels technically fine, but emotionally flat, disconnected, numb. You wonder why joy feels distant, why relationships feel shallow, why success feels meaningless. It's not because anything is wrong with you. It's because the version of you that's showing up is incomplete. The mask is showing up ... but your soul is still waiting, and it whispers gently but firmly, I'm still here. I remember who we were before we had to perform. The truth is, the persona served a purpose. It got you through. It helped you survive. It kept you safe when the world wasn't ready for your truth. But now, you are ready to live, not just function. Ready to connect, not just be liked. Ready to feel whole, even if it means being misunderstood. Because you weren't born to be someone's version of enough. You were born to be you, unmasked, unfiltered, unedited. High functioning doesn't mean whole. It often means hollow. You've got your life together. At least, that's what it looks like. You're productive, polite, dependable. You meet your deadlines. You respond to texts. You show up, even when it hurts. You've become what the world calls high functioning. But let's be honest, that's just a fancy way of saying you're great at pretending you're okay even when you're not. In modern American culture, doing well is often mistaken for being well. But the truth, they're not the same. You can be the most put together person in the room and still feel like a ghost in your own life. You know how to succeed. You know how to perform. But somewhere in that performance, you lost the ability to feel connected to yourself, to others, to something real. And the scariest part, no one knows, because the mask doesn't just fool them. It fools you. You convince yourself you're just tired, just busy, just stressed, but deep down, there's a numbness that won't go away. A subtle ache that says, this isn't who I really am. You go to work, you go home, you scroll. You smile, you repeat. But it doesn't feel like living. It feels like maintenance, like you're keeping a machine running that was never meant to carry this much emotional weight. And when someone asks how you are, you hear yourself say it again. I'm fine, even though you feel empty, even though the smile doesn't reach your soul, even though the life you're managing so well feels like it belongs to someone else. You're not fine, you're just functional. And there's a difference. You've spent so long performing stability that you forgot how to feel whole, and it's not your fault. You were raised in a system that praised resilience, but punished emotional honesty. A culture that celebrates strong, but shames soft. That values image over integration. So you adapted. You became the reliable one, the strong one, the one who never breaks. But inside, you're tired, not just physically, existentially. You're tired of being on, tired of keeping it together, tired of wondering when you'll finally feel something real again. Here's the truth. Being functional is not the same as being fulfilled. Being efficient is not the same as being alive. You don't need to be more productive. You need to be more present with yourself, with your truth, with the parts of you that are tired of pretending, because high functioning without wholeness is just slow emotional erosion, and your soul, it wasn't built for survival mode. It was built to feel, to love, to rest, to speak. And it's still in there, underneath the mask, waiting for permission to come back to life. For letting go of the persona feels like death, because it is. Here's something most people won't tell you. Letting go of your persona doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like death, not a physical death, but a psychological unraveling, an identity funeral. Because if you've worn the mask long enough, you don't just use it, you become it. You tell yourself, this is who I am. I'm the calm one, the confident one, the high achiever. But slowly, you start to notice cracks in that narrative. You start to question your own reactions. Why am I so tired after social interactions? Why do I feel fake even when people love me? Why does my life look full, but feel hollow? And then it hits you. You weren't living. You were managing a character. And the moment you realize that something begins to collapse, you start to pull back from the act. Not out of rebellion, but out of exhaustion. But then comes the part no one warns you about, the fear. The raw, visceral terror of not knowing who you are without the mask. Because for years, your worth was measured by how well you played the role. You were praised for being stable, strong, low maintenance. You were loved for what you provided, not for what you truly felt. So when the mask starts slipping, you don't feel liberated. You feel exposed, naked, unsafe, like a turtle without its shell. And you start to wonder, if I stop being the version they admire, will anyone still stay? That's the grief no one talks about. The grief of letting go of a self that wasn't fully you, but still protected you, still got you through, still helped you survive a world that didn't make space for your truth. That version of you, the mask, deserves compassion because it wasn't built out of deception. It was built out of need, but now you've outgrown it. And like any transformation, this one requires a letting go, a psychological death, a conscious surrender. And it will feel like free fall, like identity loss, like losing your place in the script. But here's the paradox: the part of you that's falling apart was never really you to begin with. It was the image, the projection, the performance, and the self underneath. Raw, confused, emotional, unfinished, isn't broken. It's just real. And this is where wholeness begins. Not in pretending you've got it all figured out, but in letting go of who you're not, so you can make space for who you've always been. You are not dying, you are shedding. And what's underneath isn't weaker, it's more alive. Realness isn't rebellion, it's reconnection. In a world that rewards performance, realness feels like a threat. When you stop saying what people want to hear, when you stop showing up in ways that please everyone else, you risk being misunderstood. You risk being called selfish, sensitive, too much, not enough. And that's why so many people stay hidden behind the persona. Because at least with the mask, you're safe. You're liked, you belong, or so it seems. But deep down, you know the truth. Being accepted for a version of you that isn't real doesn't feel like love. And pretending to be something you're not, for connection, is the loneliest kind of exile. This is where the shift begins. You realize that living from the persona was never connection. It was compliance. And authenticity is not rebellion. It's reconnection. Reconnection with your body, your voice, your values. With your fear, your desire, your limits. With the self you were before the world told you who to be. This kind of realness doesn't come with applause. It comes with discomfort. You'll disappoint people. You will lose some connections. But the ones who remain, they'll love the real you. Not because you're easy, not because you're always right, but because you're real. Realness rebuilds trust, first with yourself, then with the world. And when you reconnect with your truth, you begin to notice something powerful. You don't need to prove your worth anymore. You don't need to manage people's perceptions. You don't need to earn belonging. You just belong, as you are. This is not rebellion. This is not weakness. This is the most radical act of self-respect you can make. To live as you, unmasked, unapologetic, unedited. Because realness doesn't just liberate you, it invites others to be real, too. And that is where the healing begins. That's love. That's healing. That's freedom. The persona dies. And what's left is finally real and finally free. The quietest revolution. This is not a motivational high. It's a soul-level return. And yes, it's hard. It's disorienting. It might feel like falling apart, but really, you're falling inward. Into your truth, into your body, into the self you abandoned just to survive. And now, thanks for listening.